who is there to help you grow.
Now, day 2 of David's, spelled D4VD, preliminary hearing has wrapped up, and we got some new details about what investigators found inside the Tesla registered in his name, where Celeste Rivas Hernandez's remains were discovered. An LAPD criminalist testified that investigators recovered at least 11 air fresheners from different areas of the vehicle, including the center console, rear seats, and front trunk. She also described
So this nigga called a B and tried to use air fresh. This nigga stupid, bro.
A strong odor associated with human decomposition and extensive insect activity inside the front trunk. So those details matter because prosecutors are using the condition of the Tesla, along with other physical, digital, and location evidence to build their timeline of what they believe happened after Celeste disappeared. But the air fresheners alone do not prove who placed them there, when they placed them there, or why, but we could of course speculate. Now this is of course still not the trial itself. This preliminary hearing is where prosecutors must show a judge that there is enough evidence for the case to move forward toward trial. Judge Charlene Olmedo will ultimately decide whether that happens. So in this video, we're breaking down what investigators found inside David's Tesla, the other major evidence revealed during the hearing, and what the defense may challenge as the case continues. Definitely drop a like on this video if you guys appreciate these updates, but let's get into it. So let's start with the Tesla, because that is where some of the most disturbing details from day 2 came out. Just to refresh your memory, 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez remains were discovered on September 8, 2025 inside the front trunk of this Tesla registered to David. Prosecutors identify April 23, 2025 as the likely date of Celeste's death. Her remains were found roughly 4.5 months later. When police were called to the Hollywood tow yard, there was a detective by the name of Joshua Byers. Detective Joshua Byers was among one of the people who first responded to this homicide. He testified that
My thing was like, why didn't you just burn the car?
Celeste's head and torso were inside a black cadaver bag, while a plastic garbage bag underneath contained her arms and legs. And one of the main reasons workers at the tow yard became suspicious was the smell coming from the vehicle. Celeste's remains were in an advanced state of decomposition, and by the time the investigators opened the front trunk, the odor was extremely strong. And that brings us to one of the biggest revelations from day 2. An LAPD criminalist named Chelsea Murillo testified about what investigators found while processing David's Tesla. She said there was a strong odor associated with human decomposition inside the front trunk, along with extensive insect activity. Investigators also recovered at least 11 air fresheners from different areas of the Tesla. Most were reportedly found inside the center console, while others were located around the rear seats and inside the front trunk. Now, the testimony did not establish who placed those air fresheners there, when they were placed there, or why, but prosecutors are clearly presenting them alongside the odor and the condition of the vehicle as part of the larger picture of what investigators discovered inside David's Tesla. And that brings us to another detail involving the vehicle: possible blood evidence. LAPD criminalist Chelsea Murillo testified that investigators got a possible blood reaction in the back section of the Tesla near the rear seats. But during cross-examination, David's attorney Blair Burke pushed back on how much that result actually proved. She pointed out that the test was only presumptive and asked whether that meant investigators had definitely found blood. And then LAPD criminalist Chelsea Murillo agreed that it did not. In simple terms, the first test only suggested that the substance could have been blood, but by itself it did not conclusively prove that blood was present or identify whose blood it may have been. However, in their court filing, prosecutors say separate biological samples collected from inside the garage were later confirmed as blood, and that DNA testing matched various samples to Celeste. What is not yet clear from the reporting is whether every individual item that reacted during the initial testing was separately confirmed through DNA analysis. Another major part of day 2 focused on the garage at David's Hollywood Hills rental home, where investigators conducted additional forensic testing. Later in the hearing, LAPD criminalist Lauren Wallace testified. Her job was to examine the property for forensic evidence and explain what investigators found during the search. She said investigators used a chemical called Blue Star inside David's garage. Basically, Blue Star can reveal possible traces of blood that may have been cleaned up or are too faint to see with the naked eye. When it reacts, the area glows blue. And for anyone who's seen Dexter, you probably remember him using this thing called luminol to reveal hidden blood at crime scenes. Blue Star is not the exact same product, but it works on the same basic principle. You spray it over an area, and if it reacts, part of the surface can begin glowing blue, even when no stain was visible before. LAPD criminalist Lauren Wallace, testified that Blue Star reacted on black rubber floor mats inside David's garage, as well as on the brick floor underneath those mats. Investigators also received preliminary positive results from a rowing machine, a crumpled green tarp, and brown-stained wipes inside a black trash bag in the garage. Then investigators tested the inflatable pool. LAPD criminalist Lauren Wallace said that when they unrolled it, the inflatable pool smelled unusually fresh, almost like laundry, and dryer sheets were stuck to it. She did not see any blood with her own eyes, but after the inflatable pool was sprayed with this chemical Blue Star, one section glowed blue. Again, the glowing reactions alone did not prove that every tested area contained blood. So for this part, I'm thinking that the prosecution may use that laundry smell and the dryer sheets attached to the pool to argue that some of the items had been cleaned, but testimony did not establish who cleaned them or exactly when that happened. Now, the next major detail from day 2 involved Celeste's passport. Just to refresh your memory, earlier this year we learned that Celeste's U.S. passport card had been found by a Caltrans worker. Caltrans is the agency responsible for maintaining California's roads and highways. The passport was discovered in January 2026 in a brushy dirt area off State Route 154, also known as San Marcos Pass Road near Lake Cachuma in Santa Barbara County. During day 2 of the hearing, a California Highway Patrol officer testified that he collected the passport from the worker who found it. The card was then displayed on a screen inside the courtroom. The photograph on the passport shows Celeste when she was only 11 years old because the card had been issued in May 2022. Her mother reportedly became emotional when the image appeared in court, which is of course very understandable. Now, throughout this case, we've repeatedly heard about these trips that David allegedly made to Santa Barbara County. And when you look at the area, it is a completely different world from where David stayed most of the time. Hollywood, State Route 154 runs through a more remote, mountainous part of the county, passing through areas near Lake Cachuma with long stretches of road and hills. So that matters because prosecutors say David traveled to that same general area 3 separate times. According to their timeline, he first drove towards State Route 154 near Lake Cachuma late on the night of April 23, 2025, shortly after prosecutors allege Celeste was killed. They claim he was attempting to dispose of her belongings and destroy evidence. Prosecutors say he then returned to that same area on May 8 and again on May 31st. They also say location data placed him near the area where Celeste's passport was eventually discovered. So in the prosecution's version of events, this was not simply a random passport found beside a highway. They believe the location of the card, combined with David's alleged trips to Santa Barbara County, supports their broader claim that those trips were connected to disposing of Celeste's belongings or destroying evidence. But this is very important. The passport being found there does not by itself prove that David personally discarded it. That remains part of the prosecution's larger theory, and the defense can still challenge how strongly the location data connects him to the passport itself. But if this is all true, then the question of course would be, why would David even be near where the passport was found? And they did also claim that he drove away from his home that particular night when Celeste died, as he texted Celeste's phone asking, "Where are you?" And this was as a way to create basically an alibi, according to the prosecution. Now, this is not new information. It was in some of the earlier documents. I'll just let the prosecution do their job. Now, another thing we're going to touch on once again is David's money. So yesterday we talked about David's money very briefly because they mentioned it on day 1, but day 2 actually gave us a little more detail. So the court heard from a man named Luis Poimiro. He's a senior finance executive at Interscope Records, the label David was signed to. He testified about how much money the label paid David and his companies between 2022 and 2025. According to his testimony, those payments included around $3.9 million in 2023. That's a lot of damn money. And another $2.3 million in 2025. He also confirmed that Interscope ended David's deal at the end of 2025 and has paid him nothing in 2026. So prosecutors, of course, introduced those numbers because they're trying to support their theory that David had a highly profitable career to protect, and that's why he allegedly killed Celeste. But again, the money itself does not prove motive. It only shows what prosecutors believe he may have had at risk. And that brings us to another reason inside David's professional circle, Benjamin Gregor, one of the people who helped manage the money connected to David's career. Prosecutors were not only asking David's financial manager about earnings, they were also trying to find out what people inside David's professional circle knew about Celeste before her remains were discovered. So David's financial manager testified that he already knew Celeste's first name. He said he had heard the name from David's actual manager, and David's manager is Rob Morgenroth. It appears that Rob is the general manager for David, by the way, or was, because I'm not sure if they work together now. It seems like David has multiple managers, or again, perhaps had. Now, David's manager, Rob, was even closer to his day-to-day career, so that connection matters, because the prosecutors appear to be trying to show that Celeste was not some completely unknown person to the people around David himself. Now, prosecutors then asked David's financial manager whether David's manager had described Celeste as David's girlfriend, but before he could answer, David's defense attorney objected.
Open a Chime checking account in 2 minutes and we'll spot you up to $200. Apply now.
David's girlfriend, but before he could answer, David's defense attorney objected, which is basically lawyer language for nope, we're not letting that question slide, hell no. The reports do not explain the exact legal reason the objection was sustained, but the practical effect was simple. His financial manager, Benjamin Greger, was not allowed to answer, so the court never heard him confirm whether David's manager had described Celeste as David's girlfriend. But prosecutors did not rely only on what David's financial manager had heard. Investigators had already testified that travel records showed David purchased airline tickets for himself and Celeste for trips to London and Texas. And this is where the travel testimony becomes really interesting. So, you guys remember how prosecutors previously claimed that David drove to Lake Elsinore, where Celeste was from, and paid a junior high school student in Celeste's class $1,000 to give her a phone he had purchased, so the two of them could stay in contact. They also claimed that throughout 2024, Celeste spent a significant amount of time with David, including summer weekends at his Hollywood Hills home, and then some of these trips, which were to Las Vegas, and then of course again London, and then Texas, where prosecutors say she met his family. Very interesting. Well, during day 2 of the preliminary hearing, some of those alleged trips were finally brought up in court, and the person prosecutors questioned about them was David's financial manager, Benjamin Greger. Now, David's financial manager was not someone who personally went on these trips with them, but because he worked inside David's professional circle, prosecutors were trying to find out what he had heard and what the people around David may have known about Celeste. More specifically, David's financial manager testified that he had heard Celeste traveled to London with David. So at first they were trying to figure out, hey, did David's manager describe Celeste as David's girlfriend? And then now they're questioning his financial manager, Benjamin Greger. Did you know about these trips that David took with Celeste to, let's say, places like London? And that boy Benjamin actually confirmed that he actually had heard about the London trip. And then the prosecution, they try to take the questioning further. They asked about the alleged trip to Texas, whether Celeste had met David's family, and whether she had used fake identification to enter nightclubs with him. And this is when David's attorney immediately began objecting. Your Honor, objection. Which is basically, of course, them saying, hold the fuck on. You got way too much dip in your chip. You not getting all that, in lawyer language. And after several objections, the judge stopped that line of questioning. So they almost got this piece of information, which would have been very important, right? Now, here's what I really want you to take away from this. David's financial manager confirmed that he had heard about the London trip, but the claims involving Texas, meeting David's family, and using fake identification were brought up by prosecutors without fully being confirmed through his testimony. And that of course matters because prosecutors appear to be building the argument that Celeste was not someone David had only met once, like he of course said on that body cam video, which we haven't seen yet. But during the first encounter with police when Celeste was missing back in 2024, David said, hey, I've only met Celeste once. Yeah, buddy, sure. And that we know was, like Jesse Pinkman said, what a load of crap. But I digress. So here they're of course trying to show that she was known inside David's circle and had allegedly spent far more time with him than he initially told police. But again, some of those details remain allegations from prosecutors rather than facts established through this particular witness. Now, what makes this testimony so interesting is that back in 2024, like I said, right, when the police came to David's home while Celeste was missing, he said that he had only met her once. And then now someone who worked on his own team is saying he had actually heard about Celeste traveling with David. So this particular witness, who knew David personally and worked with him very closely, basically just fucked this whole damn shebang up. So David is basically trying to distance himself from Celeste, like, I only met her once. But the witness accounts are looking a little different. So because Benjamin Greger worked inside David's financial team, it's not surprising that he may have heard about major international travel connected to David. But to be clear, Benjamin Greger did not testify that he personally booked those flights, reviewed those specific expenses, or knew every detail about the trips. Prosecutors appear to be using his testimony to argue that the alleged relationship was way more extensive and way more widely known.
Man, bottom line, this nigga going to jail, man. See y'all in a couple seconds, another couple minutes. Love y'all.